One thing to remember is changes have successes and failures as they progress. There is no such thing as a perfect project. The four speakers had a discussion about taking these lessons learned from each other, and then during this discussion we started to agree that all projects have successes and failures as they move along, but progress doesn't always go as smoothly as we planned. What it also allowed us to say that although our projects had different contexts and that we have worked in different environments and in different societies, we started to identify some common themes across all of the projects. What we decided to do was, by taking all of this positive and negative experience, we identified 3 key skills to promote a project's successful change, and then 2 challenges that they must also overcome. What these challenges and these skills are what are going to be the basis of today's webinar. So, moving forward, first of all, I'd like to introduce you to the 2 projects which I am going to introduce these change into before we then talk about the lessons that will be introduced through this. The first of the projects is the creation of a brand new PMO that will be created for an engineering business which is based in Jeddah within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The original start date was for October. However, we are moving now into November due to the fact that it just takes a little bit of time sometimes to get that paperwork right. The reason for the PMO is that although the business has been doing project management for around about 4 to 5 years, each and every time it has started a new project or it has gone into the project management world, it's suffered very badly on its deliveries. It's never delivered on time, it's always overspent, it never seems to quite get to the right quality it's looking for. When I investigated this first of all, I discovered that when I asked about business level or portfolio level management, I had blank faces in front of me. Therefore, one of the key things that I had to do was try to understand how best to structure this for the organisation. With the additional part of having project managers from various backgrounds and with varying experience, every one of them was guaranteed to be PMP qualified. This is a prerequisite within the Middle East that everybody that runs a project must be PMP. Well, this particular engineering business also does an awful lot of businesses for projects for government. Well, a government prerequisite also for a project manager, as much as we would ask, why would you need it? Everybody that has to be a project manager in these areas has to have a PhD. These PhDs and the PMP qualification still didn't seem to help with any delivery. Add to that the final part, which is that their project directors had no formal qualifications in their fields and had only learnt what they'd learnt on the job. This therefore meant that when we start this in November, we have identified we have a major hurdle to overcome. The second project is the introduction of change to a complete new area for me. This second project came about purely by chance. I was away working on an introduction of a new project management course in Nairobi when I was walking through Masai Market. I was approached by an individual who introduced himself as the head of the Pope John Paul II orphanage school, and after I'd verified who he was and that we understood his credentials, myself and Mr. Simon Sulu sat down and we agreed that with myself, my organisation and the assistance of a German organisation called BE Change, we would help to organise a transformational change project for his school. What the idea would be was that the United Nations would fund the project and that all the funding arrangements would start in November. However, wanting to get ahead of the game, In September, the relevant Kenyan officials and the necessary UN contacts have all been put in place, and we should be ready to start the paperwork and the formal letters for requests for funding as soon as we possibly can. The reason for this is because the school itself depends solely on donations. There is no funding that comes in, there is no national elements which pay into this school because of the region it's in and because it's a semi-official school. Therefore, the plan is to create a repair and maintenance program whilst also having an enhancement to the education program that they've got already, which would cover the standard subjects that you and I know so well. But we also want to introduce project and change management life skills. What this will allow them to do is improve any job prospects for the people in the area. And to give an idea, with their current unemployment rate being at 80%, we spoke when staying across in Nairobi to one of the managers of the Intercontinental Hotel there, and he told me that he actually came from that school and that region. He's going to be used as one of the success stories to be able to demonstrate this. The final part that is very important to us within this project is, due to a major issue in this particular area being human trafficking, one of the things we're also going to introduce is welfare training. This is going to allow us to cover personal health, the community life and the community aspect of why we can all work together for each other, and then a little bit more about sexual awareness and parenting. As I am sure you'd possibly appreciate, the level of pregnancy within the school is much higher than you would want it to be because of the lack of understanding and the lack of education in this field. So, with those being the two projects that we've covered, let's take a look at what we were talking about earlier. We want to start looking now at these key skills of transformational change. As we mentioned earlier, after the May event, we identified these three key skills to help with project and change buy-in and to make the projects more successful for the future. These three we're going to look at in greater detail now, but we're generally looking at the subject of ensuring that people understand that they have to accept a change emotionally and to actually feel valued in part of the change. That will be the first area we cover. Then we need to look at the provision of clear, regular and transparent communication for everybody, so that everybody gets a say in what they're hearing and what they're doing. And then the final part that we'll look at is how stakeholder involvement and how we should start to plan for the end from the very beginning so that everybody understands their roles and responsibilities. Let's move forward onto the first one, and let's start taking a look at the implementing of transformational change and looking at why it is that people must accept a change emotionally. What we mean by this is that they need to gain a real success by feeling the change. What this means is, first of all, we need to invest the time and the energy to understand what this new project needs and to ensure that we supply it with the right resources in the right way. Without resourcing the project correctly at this early stage, you are already creating unnecessary problems that can lead to a failure and to gain traction at these so important stages that are there. What we have to accept is that also when we introduce change, there will be kickback. Some people will resist. But when you're having this resistance, your focus has to be, although listening, to pursue that end goal consistently. You need to reinforce and remind people why the change is occurring. One of the most common loss of interests in a project not be looking for those quick fixes, that opportunity to say, well, if we did that for them, that would make them happy. These should be built into the scope. We're not looking for a patchwork solution. We are looking for a sustainable solution, something that we know that in years to come will have made a real difference. As I said, some people will stand against you. And when you face this adversity, just remember one thing, and one thing more importantly than anything else. The change that you are making is paramount to a successful future for the business. So stand firm and make sure that although people may not want it now, they will understand the benefit as it goes through. But be cautious. Don't try and make the business fit your change. What you're going to find is certain times you try and squeeze something in that doesn't quite go. The square peg and round hole syndrome is very common, but we need to avoid that. So you need to apply greater creativity or more ingenuity into the solution that you're looking for, and to make sure that you personalize that solution so that the client gets what they want and how they want it. The second part to the change and the commitment to it is that there will always be those initial challenges. But as the challenges come along, you'll still be making progress. Remember, all progress is still progress. The recognition even of the smallest amount of progression or achievement needs to be recognized fully. This allows you to build momentum within the project, and it also boosts motivation within the team. The project, as you know full well with most projects, will go through numerous iterations in the early point. There's nothing wrong with this. This is the opportunity to allow people to have a great say in what they want to, and to be able to shape the future together. By being able to shape this future, and by being able to get what's right in the early stages, firstly, it avoids major change later on. But the one thing that you need to ensure is, as we change and we reiterate back through the process, we always remember the original reason why we did the project. Early engagement, therefore, is key to all successful change. So make sure you involve the right people right from the beginning. The moment you do that, and you include people in those early discussions, and you maintain that discussion with them, they start to feel more valued. If you can have people that value you as much as you value them, then you are now on the right track towards success. As you know, listening is one of those key skills that you must use at all stages. However, a word of caution. Tread cautiously around those people that suddenly want involvement in the project once those first hurdles may have been achieved, such as getting the funding approval or getting it through those first stage gates. Those people that know best because they've always been there and therefore have to have their say. This isn't to say that you ignore them, because nobody gets ignored. However, be careful as to what's on their mind and what directions they want to take things. We've all come across numerous experts in our life, but be very careful about what they're experts in. And remember, you're in control of the project. But as much as you're in control of the project, remember, the change belongs to the business. This is about making a change for the business or the client or the customer. The change does not belong to you. At the very end of this project, at the very end of this change, you're going to do a handover to the client or the customer. You don't get to take the project home with you. Therefore, remember who it belongs to. The second key skill that we need to look around is the ability to provide clear, regular, and transparent communication. We've already mentioned it's important to involve everybody. Well, ensure that everybody that's involved with the change actually understands what's changing. One of the greatest things that happens in certain projects is that people say, I know I'm on the project because we're doing a change, but they don't quite understand what it is that's actually changing, but also, if we don't change, what the consequences might be. This needs to be drilled home as a message to as many people as possible at the earliest opportunity. This open communication must start right from the beginning. This allows you to develop these partnerships, these friendships, or these relationships, which therefore also promotes idea creation. Any project manager that finds themselves sitting in a corner on their own to develop the transformational change will soon learn that change is almost impossible. You can't do it on your own. It's about asking for help, and it's about accepting it from the right people. To be able to do this, you need to promote positive communication between the change that's happening itself, the change team that are in there, and also the business. By having this open and positive creation, what this allows you to do is this creates greater visibility. By making the tone of the conversations and the meeting more positive from the start, you send out the right message to everybody that's involved. Visibility of the change is paramount. Therefore, the repeated and regular reporting is going to build that momentum up that you need to make the change happen more smoothly. And as progress goes on, the selection of where you place your milestones to be able to report success and achievement, and as it becomes more visible to everybody else, becomes even more important. It's keeping people's interest and keeping those messages out. So therefore, when you send something out, no matter what it is that you're sending out at the time, remember one thing: feedback is important to you. The communication that you do and the communication that you receive can only be enhanced through good practice and through demonstrating an honest and transparent approach to what is happening. By being able to demonstrate this honesty and this transparency, this will allow you to build and form your critical mass for acceptance, and therefore allow the change to move forward and progress how you want to. All news, no matter how good or bad it is still news. Therefore, it's so important that you know how to share the news. Sharing good news is typically a lot easier than bad news. However, sharing the right information and never misleading with the information is very important to making sure a change works smoothly. The more people speaking positively about the project and about your change, then the greater the message gets shared. Therefore, encourage all forms of positive communication throughout your team and throughout your stakeholders. Any single person that's involved in your project, just get them to talk more about the project. But remember, positivity wins. This is what makes all the difference to progress your project further. The phrase that you see there, which reads, "Honesty breeds loyalty and deception destroys truth," is a poster that I created in one of my previous projects. And what it did, without actually drilling home the message to people, is it set the standard without having to constantly tell people to be honest. Most people are honest, and they don't need to be told. However, that picture on the wall all the time, which talks about positive rather than negative and honesty rather than deception, makes a massive difference. It sets a standard organisation. Now, having worked globally on projects now for probably around about 10 years, I tend to find that language differences are no longer a barrier. In actual fact, they're a huge benefit to you. However, some people will then argue that you just spent 2 years in Saudi Arabia and you can hardly speak Arabic. I don't need to speak fluent Arabic. You can generally tell by people's mannerisms and through their gestures what they're trying to say. The key thing is to actually encourage the communication of your team in their native language. This therefore works to your advantage. However, just remember one thing. You need somebody that can translate it at the end so that it comes back to you, and you've got to trust for that translation. The key thing you're trying to do is communicate that vision, a regular reported message that goes out so that, much like with my team, I had them saying, yes, we know. Because I knew they knew, it meant the message was getting in. We need people to remember, why did we actually start this? Particularly on projects that last 2, 3, 4, and 5 years, it's so easy to forget why we started this in the first place. The last of the 3 key skills is to ensure that you engage with your stakeholders early and that you have stakeholder involvement to understand how you're going to plan and hand over through the relevant responsibilities for people so that they know what they're doing. From the very beginning of your project, failure to engage will lead to failure to deliver. You need to set out the clear scope of who's doing what right from the very start. Accept that some people will need to be told more than others, and also accept that some people already know and just need that little guidance and that little push. The lack of engagement that you show at these early stages, and therefore my wording about don't lock yourself away, can lead typically to the change being owned by you and not the business. Because everybody says, oh, that's Mark or that's Jennifer's project. No, it's not. It's the business's project. All you are is the front face of it. Therefore, you've got to own responsibility, but you do not own the change. Now, when it says here about planning for handover at the earliest stage, the first thing that people generally say to me is handover occurs towards the end. And we all know that. It does. However, here's a question that bounces back towards you. When do you actually start planning for Christmas? Because I'll guarantee it's not on the 24th of December, or it's going to be a short planning cycle. The same applies to handover. Being able to set up a date or a situation at which the business will take responsibility and you will hand over that project allows you to increase the focus of the team and all those stakeholders around it of when something key is going to happen. Now, one of the most important parts about being involved in the project is knowing your own parameters and being able to know your own limits. This is not just authoritarian limits, this is your own professional practice limits. Don't try to be the master of everything. Much is explained within the book, which is called The Incomplete Leader. What it allows you to do is understand that others take responsibility for their own areas because they know their areas better than you do. And that others also understand their job better than you understand their job for them. So when it comes to deciding what needs to be done, how things should be demonstrated within the project, then start to consider and start to think about who knows best. And generally you'll discover by asking for help, you will receive the right sort of help. By being able to create this regular and repeated engagement, what this does is it builds the relationship. It creates stronger ties with everybody that's involved, and it builds that greater trust. By being able to build up this trust, what this allows you to do is therefore move the project forward in a far more successful way. The active dialogue that you're going to look for with your stakeholders helps to anticipate many of the issues. The reason behind this is we need to avoid surprises. After all, no one likes them. No one likes to be caught wrong-footed when they're in the business. So by keeping an active and a regular dialogue going, problems that start to occur can be discussed at the earliest possibility. Clarification of the people's responsibilities will allow them to be part of the solution itself. And by doing this, the business gets greater involvement in the decision-making side of the project. What this should do is by allowing them to make more of the decisions with you, not instead of you. That's a very important thing to put over. What this also should do is reduce any of the risks of litigation later, because you'll have already had those open dialogues about what needed changing and how it should be changed. Now, stakeholders themselves are a beast to themselves. Navigating your way through the stakeholders' demands and their needs will keep you fully focused on the direction and the progress of the project. So knowing who they are, what they value, what helps them, what hinders them, what makes them happy, and also what doesn't make them so happy, allows you to invest valuable time to become not only more professional, but socially responsible as a project or a change manager. Understanding the people and how they feel when things are happening and how things are progressing allows you to understand the project so much more. Now, as time goes on, it's always more pleasant when this happens. You will receive praise from the stakeholders. You are committed to the project. You are creating a sustainable business change. This is going to help us build our business for a greater future. This is all wonderful to hear and will boost the morale and the recruitment of the business if you are introducing this change well for the future. However, keep one thing in mind when you're receiving this praise. Don't forget you're part of a team. Therefore, do not forget to share the praise when it's given, because it's all part and parcel of you being part of the change. If you're seen to be the only one that ever receives that praise, you'll soon demotivate the team, and then that progress and that momentum that you've created will start to be lost. Now, having seen that we had the positive things that we've learned from it, we also now know that not everything in change and project management comes easily. And the first major challenge that had to be overcome, as we saw from our discussion, was lack of ownership. Right from the very earliest point that you can make it, ensure the business has a voice so that it can build its own sense of ownership. You are not putting this change upon them. Remember, it is their change that they are trying to invest their time and their energy into. Having their ability to be able to influence the strategy, being able to say how the project or the change will help them understand what happens, gives them greater accountability for the decisions that they're going to make as well. So what is your view? So how do you feel this should go forward? What is your opinion on this? All these things allow the business to speak up for itself. Then, by giving them greater ownership of the project, this will increase the business's empathy towards that change and how it's going to be required. Reason being, keep in mind, they are part and parcel of the change. Therefore, as you start to move forward with the business, learn to delegate the relevant authority as well as some of the tasks that you give, as this will allow your leadership skills to be developed as part of the change. Therefore, you are growing as the business is changing. Keep one thing in mind though. Different people change in different ways. You need to understand who you are influencing and how they change. All change influences people. Therefore, you need to build the awareness around what type of cultural diversities you have, what type of culture you are delivering the change in, and therefore the understanding of, and it's an old phrase that people use but forget a lot, which is the pestle element of context, and consider the various different change styles that are available, rather than saying we do it one way and so this is all that works. Understand the people, because the people are what matters. Then finally, by introducing all of this ownership and allowing the business to have such an involvement in the change, it will empower the business to drive the change through itself. You will become basically the navigator for them, where they then drive it on. The second of the two challenges allows us to reach the last of the lessons that we learned, and possibly one of the hardest that is to achieve. As we just mentioned in the previous challenge, people will be people. And so a clearer understanding of their expectations and also what they fear is so important to be able to get the message over. What does success really look like? On the other hand, how will failure appear to them? And you've got to understand that different people will see the change in different ways, because some will see it as a huge change, something that is changing their life forever, where others will just see it as a step along the way to a greater change. What's important is that you need to be one of those people that understands how to manage their expectations, but also to curb some of the fears about what the future may hold. To be able to do that, first of all, you've got to learn not to be shy in speaking out. To be able to do that, first of all, you need to know your own expectations and fears. Then, when you understand what you're expecting on the project and what you expect from yourself, learn to share them with the others that are involved with the business. Once you start to share, you open up the door to other people to be able to share back. Therefore, then, we need to know what expectations there are of you, but also what you're asking of the business. Now, one of the key things to remember when asking the expectations on the business is to remember that your expectations must be capable of being delivered within the scope of the change. So don't push for too much if you're not being asked to make that change within the project as well. Therefore, this allows you to remove the inflated expectations for you, for the business, and also for those being impacted by the change. This is done by meeting up together and establishing a mutual agreement. Once that agreement is in place, find a way of documenting it This does not mean a formal contract of something, although in certain cases that may be what's required. But what you're trying to do is promote this change ethos. This change ethos potentially has the ability to become, and most commonly becomes, something like a mission statement. And then by having this mission statement, what it allows you to then do is promote and publish what is needed and what's expected of them. So we have now reached the summary. One thing to remember is, as we said before, changes have successes and failures as they progress. There is no such thing as a perfect project. What we discussed were the 3 key skills which allow you to initiate the change, and an understanding of how to bring about those skills. In addition, we looked at the 2 challenges to change initiatives, and then how to overcome those challenges. But there's one key message that comes at the end. When dealing with transformational change, you should be focusing around improvements for the future. What this means is, when you identify the change that's going to occur, ensure you understand the reasoning behind the change and make that change as effective as possible. There is no point in change for change's sake. There is no reason to change just because it's been the same for so long. Always understand the reason why you change and what you're trying to change into. So, at that point, I'd like to say thank you. I'd like to move on to the next slide for any questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
The thanks are all to you, Mark. One is, how do you manage expectations where problems are endemic in an area, but there's only so much resource that can be applied?
What a wonderful question to start with. I always like an easy one. Problems will always exist. That is the reason why project managers are almost here to do this. And so therefore, the endemic problems need to be identified as at their source. All too often, what we tend to do is we patch over problems because we see them as their symptom rather than identifying them as their root cause or what the real problem is. My suggestion and answer to the relevant question is, and I like the piece which fit in, when you are limited by resource. There is a simple answer to that, which is only manage it in the smaller steps and in smaller changes. Sometimes, all too often, we try and do too much too soon. Therefore, use the resource that is available to fully understand what the problem really is. Then, once you've identified what the genuine problem is, then implement the change on that problem. If that therefore leads to 10 to 12 changes in a year, but small and necessary changes, that's so much better to be able to control and to manage than it would be to try and do it all in either 1 or 2 big changes where the problems are never truly understood and are embedded into the system. By having this embedded problem, it means that the root cause is never identified, and what it therefore leads to is you are masking over the real problems, and it leads to a change which isn't as effective as it should be.
Thank you very much. As a sort of lead on from that, I guess, are you seeing that CMOs are becoming increasingly popular to emphasize the importance of change activities?
There's a quick answer, which is yes, and now I'll explain why. More and more organizations globally are starting to recognize the value that a PMO, when structured correctly and organized correctly, brings to any business. What this allows people to do is have a central source of quality. All too often, what used to happen, and the reason why the PMO, or as it used to be just a PSO, used to be given a bad name, was that people would be almost put in there as you need a change, we don't think you fit into this department, so let's give you the project support to do. Now, more and more, project management and project management officers are beginning to get more recognition for what they can actually do. There is such a growth within PMOs now that the enterprise project management office is starting to come on board, which is driving businesses forward. By being able to have such a huge say now in the business, not only their popularity, but their importance is growing. A perfect example to be able to see that is if you go onto something such as LinkedIn or one of the job sites, any of them, and type in PMO manager or just the phrase PMO, just look at how many organizations, and we're talking large scale, big corporate organizations, are now pushing for more and more PMO duties and PMO staff.
Thank you very much. How would you see the differences between the PM's accountability and what a PMO should address?
What an excellent, another wonderful question. Start first of all. The project manager is responsible for delivering the project. Everybody accepts that. That is, in effect, its true definition. That's what you're there to do. The PMO's responsibilities and the PMO's responsibilities to the project manager and the project manager's responsibilities to the PMO should be that the relationship allows a compatibility between the two. To be able to fully understand what is it that the PMO should be doing for the project manager, this should be outlined initially when the PMO is built and then re-established as the growth of the project and the PMO's responsibilities can take on further responsibilities. At no point should the PMO be seen as the ones that are delivering the project on behalf of the project manager, but the project manager should see them as almost a right-hand man, so that they can say to them, I know I need you to be able to fit or find this relevant data, information, or carry out this task with me. Never should the project manager abdicate responsibility to a PMO, but the PMO should have a strong and powerful say in ensuring that the project manager is delivering the project correctly and that it's being managed using the relevant governance, processes and procedures. And to that end, the project manager should then listen to the PMO about the guidance it can offer and the direction that it can give.
Thank you very much. Transformational projects are notoriously difficult. How do you ensure the communication and discussions around a business are positive?
One of the biggest challenges is to get people to speak positively anyway. There are always too many people that will tell you why something can't happen. And the only way that you can, and you can't ensure it, but you can drive it as best you can, is to start with a positive communication plan which states acceptability within the type of language and the use of language, the way that people need to promote and push certain things. It doesn't mean that you never tell them when things go wrong, but what you do ensure is that you get the message over in the right way. The only way that that can be done is by instilling it in the beginning and with yourself. If you are seen to drive the message forward, and with that relationship that you typically have with your project sponsor or the business, that they are promoting it as a key driver and that it matters to them as well, this is the sort of thing that needs to be of the time. By pushing this positive framework, what it allows people to have also is we are open to people asking questions as long as they're asked in the right way. Therefore, things may not be right and you may not be happy with them in a certain way. By creating a forum or some form of communications feedback environment, we want you to feedback. But don't tell us something doesn't work. There's a key word that's generally missing when people say that. And the key word we're looking for always is because. If people can explain the because, generally project managers will listen more and so will the business. We want to change this. You can't do that because it will impact in this way. What that might mean is the project manager and the project team and the business have to change the scope of the project. But by allowing that early interrogation of the scope of work and the change, and by promoting that change early and allowing as many people as possible to talk about it, more people will be involved. As more people are involved in it, more people buy into the answer. By buying into the answer, that creates a more positive vibe within the project or the business environment, which therefore should give a greater push towards the change.
Thinking about Agile, how does the role of the PMO change as projects are starting to be managed in an increasingly agile way?
The project manager within the agile way now is almost becoming more of a coordinative thing than, in effect, the delivery and driver. Because of the way that agile works and the trust and the emphasis that's put onto the other people that are driving things forward for them. What's starting to happen is the project manager has to almost just become far more of the conductor towards the orchestra, because the orchestra these days is playing so much more within the agile environment. I'm very fortunate that my son works within the gaming industry, and this is very much an agile software development environment. And he works within the production side of games development. What he's discovering, even in these early stages, is where the old-fashioned, shall we say, waterfall approach towards project management meant that there was a lot more planning involved and it was far more rigorous and there was a lot more responsibility on the project manager. Far more of this is now being delegated down, and the project manager is learning a different leadership style and a different leadership role to ensure that those that are doing the programming work or they're preparing the software development in some other way, those are the ones that are driving the project, and it's just ensuring that the things are happening at the right time in the right way. And so therefore things such as resourcing and teamwork and management become more of the project manager's element, and a lot of the actual delivery has now become and takes greater responsibility to those that are doing it.
Thank you very much indeed. Just the last question now, going back to the two examples you gave at the beginning, the international work. We have had a question in about a global company and obviously how that will change things. Do you think that transformation can be carried out globally in sort of multicultural, diverse organisations? And have you had any main barriers?
Right. The answer again is yes, because everything is possible. This is the great joy of working with the APM. They make things possible. However, I introduced with a team a change which occurred about 3 years ago, and it was to do with the change of how they deliver projects right across the whole globe. This is a huge organisation, and to do this, I was in 8 locations at various times to make the change. The key part behind it is there is a one core message that goes through. Now, that one core message is the spine behind what the change will be and how it will exist. However, for example, within it, introducing the change in China is somewhat different than introducing the change in the United States. What you've got to do is understand the core change and what the business is trying to achieve. That strategic message has to go out first of all. However, the trust then has to be built into either the relevant project offices, or if they are fortunate enough to have them, the PMOs around the world, to instigate that change, but under the context of the environment in which they're in. Therefore, around an awful lot of the time, around social values and around the political influence or the legislation. These will always have subtle changes to it, but at the very beginning, when the change is being identified, the business needs to understand why is it wanting to make the change and what will the objectives of the change be. They then have to limit that change to what is possible globally, and then accept that there will be certain intricacies, country by country or region by region. But in answer to the question, can it be done? Yes, it can be done, and yes, it should be done, because then the global organization, no matter whether or not you're working in the Far East or right in the coast, on the west coast of the United States, the organization's still doing something a certain way, and it stands for certain values.
And that brings us to the end of your presentation and the webinar today. I would just like to say a huge thanks to Mark for sharing his wisdom and his lessons learnt. Thank you all very much for attending, and again, thank you, Mark.
My pleasure.